95% of Chinese people approve of their government? Have I been wrong all this time? Of course, this statistic is bollocks. In fact, most official statistics coming out of China are false. This is the truth, and it's been proven again and again by the Chinese government themselves. You see, they release false GDP numbers, and later on they have to say, oh, actually, some of the numbers were falsified. And this is kind of how it works. It's not always the central government's fault, although, to be honest, they want to project those numbers. But yeah, you've got the central government, then you've got provincial level governments, then it goes down to city level governments, then it goes down to towns and villages and whatever. And it's in their interests to report good numbers, especially when it comes to things like GDP or maybe COVID infection rates, things like that, to their higher-ups. Because they don't want to be seen as the weak one. They don't want to be less than their neighboring province or their neighboring city. And so what happens is they falsify numbers all the time. And then you get these falsified GDPs coming in from the different provinces and towns and so on. And the central government adds them all together and says, look, China has this amazing GDP. Meanwhile, it's based on a bunch of lies, really. And so quite often the Chinese government actually admits that they have been falsely reporting, which, to be honest, is fair play on their part. I'm glad that they actually admit this sometimes. But we all know the COVID numbers that they put out as well are falsified because it's just impossible, you know, if you look at statistics. And, of course, there have been situations where they found out that people have been underreporting or not reporting COVID infections at all, or falsifying death certificates, things like that. That's not what this video is about. This number, this 95% approval rating that apparently the Chinese people have for their government, I've been curious about this. And the main reason is CCP, sycophants, and the 50-cent army and whoever, whenever someone's talking about, like me for instance, trying to say, hey look, the Chinese people and the Chinese government are two separate things. You cannot merge them together into one. Because the government is a big communist authoritarian government, and the people are individuals. They are people with their own thoughts and their own feelings and so on. And so what the government does is not what the people necessarily endorse. And the biggest argument against that is, you don't know China, 95% of all Chinese people approve of their government, so the CCP and the Chinese people must be the same. So where does this number of 95.5% come from? Well, it doesn't actually come from the Chinese government itself. We're going to talk a little bit in a minute how the Chinese government gets its own surveys done, but it actually comes from an independent Harvard study and survey. It's outdated though. The last update they have on it is 2016, but we're going to talk about why it's so important. You see, the Chinese government does not allow any independent polling or surveys of its people when it comes to the satisfaction of the government, obviously. So Harvard went through a kind of a clandestine way to get this information. Now, before we discuss what this survey found and why you cannot trust the 95.5% number, because that's only one of the numbers in the survey and not the important one, let's find out how the Chinese government conducts its surveys. Turns out that they do a lot of telephone surveys, like official telephone surveys. So they'll call you up and basically ask you a bunch of questions and do you approve of this, do you approve of that, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing about that. Your phone number in China is tied to your 身份证, which is your ID card. So when you go and buy a SIM card for your phone, foreigners have to do it too. You have to show your passport and give them a copy. They photocopy it and stuff. I've had to do it myself. It wasn't always like that. You could buy sort of burner phones when I first got to China, but that changed fairly soon. But when you buy your SIM card for your phone, you have to provide your Chinese ID card. Now, these ID cards are unlike what we're used to in the West. Sure, you've got your driver's license, right? Or you have your social security number, or you have something like that, which people can identify a lot of information about you with. But the Chinese ID card is everything rolled into one. So it's kind of like buying a SIM card for your phone, but you have to give them your social security number, your educational history, your driver's license, your address, your spousal information, your family information, your bank account information, absolutely everything rolled into one, because that one ID card, your biometrics as well is all stored in there. That one ID card links every single aspect of your life in China. So you take a plane, you take a train, you have to use your ID card, of course. You open a bank account, you use your ID. You join a club, you have to use your ID. You do anything in China, you use that ID card of yours. When you sign up for, online WeChat or something, you're using your ID card. Everything is tied to that ID card. Every single piece of your personal information is inside that card. So when you're getting an official call from the government on your phone, which is tied to your ID card, do you think you're going to tell them that you're dissatisfied with them? I mean, this is the common sense part, guys. And this is what everyone looks over. Okay, here's the official authoritarian government, which you did not choose. You have no choice choosing, by the way, in China. There's no voting. There's no democracy. There's none of this like, oh, I don't like Xi Jinping, so I'm going to vote him out in the next election. No, 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 no. There's no Trump versus Biden in China. It's Xi Jinping versus Xi Jinping versus Xi Jinping, and what he says goes. And by the way, you better study his Xi Jinping thought while you're at it. So, when you get that phone call and they ask you, are you dissatisfied with the government? You're going to say, number one, if you're satisfied, you're going to say, yes, I'm satisfied. If you're dissatisfied, you're going to say, yes, I'm satisfied. And if you absolutely hate the government, you're going to say, yes, I'm satisfied. Why? Because the Chinese government has the power to detain anyone they want. Anyone that causes trouble can be detained under these arbitrary laws. There's a specific law that they use a lot in China. It's called spreading rumors and picking quarrels. That's the literal translation for it. And they use this when people go online and say that they're not happy with something. They might not be happy with the local government. They might not be happy with the way the school is treating their kid or anything. If it picks up enough traction and it's starting to cause waves, they will pick you up and arrest you and charge you with picking quarrels and spreading rumors. Imagine that being an actual jailable offense, which it is in China. Okay, so that's number one, why you're not going to say that you're dissatisfied with the government, because you know in the back of your mind that if you are too vocal about it, or even if you just get on their radar, you could be detained for whatever reason. Number two, apathy. Here's a big issue with Chinese society. And this is also why you find those situations where someone's in need and nobody steps in to help. The majority of Chinese society, the people I know, the people I've observed, do not want hassle in their lives. They just don't want to have to deal with something that disrupts their day-to-day, everyday life. And helping someone in need could possibly mean that you have to now go deal with police or, file a report or have to do something, deal with family, talk to other people. So it's just too mafan, as they say, too much trouble, and so they avoid it altogether. Same with these calls. You get called by the official government and they're like, do you approve of the Chinese, of the CCP? Obviously, you're just going to say yes so that they bugger off and it doesn't affect your life. Because if you say no, there is a chance that it's going to affect you, because maybe they're going to start to ask you more questions as to why. Maybe they're going to start investigating you. Maybe they're going to come give you a visit, that kind of thing. So you don't want that. So the apathy angle, it plays a huge role in this. And, I hate to say it to the people out there who kind of think that Chinese people are oppressed and they can't wait for a chance to escape, to get to freedom and stuff. That's not how it is. Most Chinese people are actually very content with their lives. Very content to just continue going forward and doing what they do. They've been brought up in this society. They've been educated in this society. And they don't all suddenly yearn to go leap out and find a way out. Of course, many, many do. And obviously all the immigrants that you see everywhere and the dissidents and stuff, they rarely have a motivation to leave. A lot of Chinese people don't. They are actually quite satisfied with their way of life as long as they don't get bothered and they get to just continue to do what they want to do. Doesn't mean they're satisfied with their government, though. And on that point, they don't want any hassle from the government. And that's why they'll just be like, yeah, it's fine, whatever, leave me alone. I just want to SerpentZA. I just want to do my daily thing and continue on. And so that's how they get the statistic. It's almost as if you've got a big bully pointing a gun at your head saying, you like me, don't you? And you just say yes, because then he moves on to the next person. You like me, don't you? And if somebody says no, then he gets shot or he gets beat up or whatever. That's about the best analogy I can come up with this. Okay, so now that we know that it's impossible to ever get an accurate idea of how the Chinese populace feels about its government from official Chinese government polls and surveys, How is it that this other poll came up to 95.5%, the Harvard poll? Let's get back into that. If we look at the study closely, the 95.5% statistic, first of all, comes from 2016, and even my fiercest detractors would agree with me that things change rapidly in China. That's too old data to base 2021 China on. I mean, I was there from 2006 to 2019, and during that time I saw, myself included, a great feeling of happiness towards what the government was doing, seeing things change around me in a positive way, open up more and more of the draconian communist type stuff falling away, and more of a Western sort of an influence coming in, as in more freedom, people being able to express themselves more, things opening up. However, in recent years, especially since 2016 onwards, we've seen a massive clampdown when it comes to more surveillance, less freedom to do what you want to do, more government control than ever before. So, the 2016 thing is a little out of date, but that's not the most important thing here. That 95.5% statistic is of what people think of the central Beijing government. Now, you have to understand that if you're out in the rural sticks somewhere, all you ever see in the media, and that's the newspaper, on TV, through any kind of official website or through all the social media apps, all you ever hear about, all you ever see with regards to the central Beijing government is how great it is. We're sending rockets into space. We're lifting people out of poverty. We're building all this infrastructure. Look at our amazing army, our amazing navy. Look how incredible we are. What a strong country we are. How great we are. How much we're progressing. And you get fed this propaganda day and night, 24/7, and that's what you see. So, of course, you're going to probably have, especially since you've grown up and been educated in this society where you're taught to worship the party and to put the party first, and the central government is everything, you're going to have a favorable idea of the central government. But here's where this whole survey falls apart. If you read further down in the survey, it turns out that when it comes to satisfaction with local governments, as in the town, sort of village, provincial sort of stuff that they deal with, the local government that you actually interact with in China. Because as a dude living in the middle of the rural countryside, you don't get to deal with the bigwigs in Beijing. You don't get to deal with the government in Beijing. There's some far-flung thing at the other side of the country that you've never been to and you've never seen before. The people that you deal with, the local Communist Party officials that you deal with, guess what the satisfaction percentage is of those people? Well, it's 11.3%. So this survey is very telling. When people actually interact with the Chinese government, their opinion of it is rubbish. It goes all the way down to 11.3. But when they think about what the central government stands for, their opinion is very high. So here's the thing. It shouldn't be that 95.5% of people are satisfied with the government. It should be that 11.3% of people are satisfied with the government and 95.5% are satisfied with the idea of the government. Now, okay, maybe you still don't buy it, but you're going to have to admit that when you're living in such a massive surveillance state like China, let's be honest, guys, here, we all know China's leading the world when it comes to surveilling its citizens. I mean, everybody has to register where they live, of course, with their local sort of police station, and there's residency officers of the police station to do this. You've got your hukou-ben, which is your residence permit for where you're allowed to live and take part in, social programs and stuff. You've got all of that. You've got the cameras everywhere. You've got the social credit system. It's all tied into that ID card, remember? And so when they phone you, they know who they're talking to. All of this kind of snowballs into a situation where you just don't want to make waves. You just don't want to ever say no. I mean, you've been brought up in an education system that makes you praise the Communist Party all the time. You've never had the choice of choosing who leads you. You can't just take China as if it's some sort of Asian version of America. A lot of people don't seem to compute this part. It doesn't have the same freedoms. It doesn't have the same choices as a Western country does. There is no choice of the government on what it does. You listen to what they say, and that's what you've been doing since you were born. And so that's what you kind of have to do as you grow up. And it gets to a point where you're just apathetic about it, and you're just like, whatever. It's like bad weather. Nothing you can do about it. It's just there. you know? And so when the bad weather starts to rain on you, you seek shelter. And it's the same kind of thing. Government starts pestering you, you find a way to get away from that annoyance. And trust me, you try to stand up and protest in China, you find out very quickly that the full forces of the police and the security and all that will come down on you. And I'm not even just talking about Tiananmen Square levels. I'm talking about small level stuff. The small protests that I have seen, which usually revolve around money and real estate deals gone wrong, they're very quickly suppressed. And they're surrounded by security guards, surrounded by police, surrounded by army sometimes, and shut down very quickly. You know, it's a different world. So I hope that explains to you why there's this 95% approval rating. It's not true. It's absolutely not true. Because out of the people that I know, you know, and I know a lot of Chinese people, I've got a huge different group of different socioeconomic backgrounds and stuff. They all talk shit about the government when you had a couple of drinks. They're not all satisfied. Sure, a lot of them think the government's great, and a lot of them like the government. A lot of them are nationalistic, but they're not all always singing the praises. Even the nationalistic ones, they complain about the government a lot. You know, how it could have done better here and there, you know, and how it affects their life in a bad way because they can't do X, Y, Z. There's not this amazing, glowing, you know, amount of support, and it's like everywhere in the world. No country in the world is going to have a huge you know, support for the government, 95%. Are you joking? I mean, think about it. What about the poor people? They complain about being poor and the fact that they don't get government support where the, you know, other people do. What about the minority groups that are, you know, downtrodden and things like that? They obviously don't 100% approve of the government. I tell you what, the Uyghurs in Xinjiang certainly don't approve of the government. That's a huge amount of people. Look, we all know that this is bullshit. I just wanted to put it out there for those of you who have maybe fallen for this, oh wait, they've got such a high approval rating. You know, it's nonsense. I mean, you can look at the Freedom House Index. China keeps dropping down. What is it, 9 out of 100 now? I mean, what the hell? Even South Africa, where I'm from, which is a basket case, is in the 70s. It's a very fascinating website, by the way. I think it's worth reading because, you know, they just deal with facts. I'll put a little bit of it up on the screen here for you guys to see. But I will put a link down below. I suggest you go take a look, read through it. They go through exactly the freedom and, you know, freedom of political freedoms and the freedom of expression, freedom of religion, all that kind of stuff. It's all in there. It's a good read. Anyway, guys, you know, thank you very much for watching. Once again, don't take these statistics by heart. You know, it's a bunch of nonsense. Anything, especially coming out of China, the official channels, is going to be doctored, and it's all about face and all that kind of thing. Can't wait to see you in the next one. And as always, you know the drill. Stay awesome.